2005 Subaru Outback need front brakes. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'm going to walk you through that process. We're going to get started by lifting the vehicle up and getting it off the ground. If you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands. I'm going to use my hoist here and go ahead and take the front wheels off. Now that we have our wheel off, what we're going to do is, the first step we're going to do to get the brakes apart. And so right here on the underside is take the bottom bolt out, the 14 millimeter. Go ahead and remove this bolt. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the caliper itself and flip it up. And on this boot right here, if you pull it with your fingers, pull the boot off the pin here a little bit. Now you can slide the whole caliper off and set it up on top of the suspension like this and let it sit here. Now what we're going to do is, backside there's going to be two 17 millimeter bolts. We're going to remove those, and this bracket, the caliper bracket, will come off. So now that we've got the caliper off and the caliper bracket off, we want to give this a good look to make sure that we can service this brake job. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the calipers, the calipers itself, and look at the boots around the pistons here and make sure that they're not torn or compromised in any way. There's no fluid leaking out of it. As you can see, this pin has plenty of lube on it already, and it slid off. When I took it off, it slid off easily. Now that that's kind of a visually inspected, we're going to look at the old pads, and as you can see, they wore pretty evenly on the inner and outer, so that's a good sign. And this pin here, the slide pin, slides back and forth. So now I'm going to go ahead and, with the old pads out, you want to inspect the hardware here and make sure it's not pitted or damaged in any way. A lot of times your brake pads will come with new hardware, and if it does, you always change those over, put the new ones on, but some of them don't. So you have to assess if you can clean these up, great, you can reuse them. If they look like they're in any rough shape at all, I recommend getting a set of them. It's worth the money, and you won't have a comeback, squeaks, all that stuff will be avoided by replacing these. After inspecting the brackets and the calipers, now we need to measure the rotor to make sure it's thick enough to machine. What happens is these get too thin, they don't dissipate heat, and then it causes them to warp. And that's when you get that feeling like the pedal is pulsating up and down the brake pedal itself. So what you do is you have to have a caliper mic, and you can measure the thickness, and then you look up the specs. Some rotors will have the spec stamped onto the rotors. A lot of times there's a lot of surface rust and you can't read it. So you can look it up. You can look it up online, and also you can look it up in a book called the Bendix Brake Books that you can buy at your parts suppliers. So our rotor on my vehicle is reading 948 thousandths. You also want to measure it in a couple spots to make sure that you want to get the lowest spot, basically, because that's when you machine it, you're going to machine out to the lowest spot. So take a couple readings around the different spots. So now I'm going to look it up in the Bendix. So my Bendix brake book here for the 2005 Outback, you kind of follow it down. It's discarded at 870 thousandths, and we're at 948. So we have plenty of meat to machine with. So we're gonna machine it. If yours is really close to this number or below that number, I recommend replacing the pad rotors. So now I'm gonna chuck this up on the brake lathe and machine the rotor. And if you guys don't have access to a rotor where you're at, I recommend taking it down to your local repair shop and have them do it for you. They'll charge you a small fee, but it's worth it to have a smooth pedal, reduce the risk of squeaks, all that type of stuff. And just when you go there, have the information of the car, year, make, model, VIN number, engine size, and tell them that's information so they can look it up, because in a lot of places, by law, it's required for them to make document that these were in spec and not undersized. And so have that information for them. They can look it up, measure it, tell you if the rotor is thick enough or not. And if it's under spec, just buy you a new set of rotors from your parts supplier. All you just slip it on. And then I wanted to show you one more tip before we take it off, is these little holes here. If you screw a 8 by 125 bolt into these screws, and turn it inwards, it'll pop the rotor off the hub. And a lot of times these are stuck on the hub. So now that you got the rotor on the lathe and turning, we're going to do a little prep work. While the rotors are turning, we need to do a little prep work. And one of the things we need to do is press the pistons back into the bores of the calipers. And before we do that though, what I like to do is go to the master cylinder here and remove a little bit of this brake fluid. Just a couple an ounce or so, just to drop the level down a little bit. And the reason why is here in a second I'm using my my dual piston caliper tool here that pushes the pistons in. But if you don't have a tool like that, you can use a C-clamp like this, and you can hook it on like that and turn it in, and it'll push the pistons in. But what I'm going to recommend you do is here on the back is the bleeder screw, and a lot of times people like to open the bleeder screw to push the pistons in. It actually makes it easier, but then after that you have to bleed the brakes. And so if you remove a little brake fluid from the master cylinder, and then you can take your tool and push the pistons in without opening the bleeder screw, and what that does is it pushes the brake fluid back through the line and back up into the master cylinder. And if the master cylinder is too full, it'll overflow and spill over the engine bay, and also it could also damage the cap or the top or the bottle itself by the pressure pushing it back out. So remove that so then it has room to expand and fill, and you won't overflow it. After getting your pistons pushed back in, what we're going to do is my brake pads didn't come with the new hardware kit. So what I did was I took my wire brush like this, little wire brush, and I cleaned the channels up really well with the wire brush, and then inspected it. And I popped this off, and underneath it I even gave it a little scrub, and then put them back on. And then now I got a really good look at them, and they're in really good shape. And they're made out of stainless steel, so they usually hold up pretty good. But depending on where you live and the climate, I live here in Southern California, so the climate's pretty good, and I usually don't see too many issues. So now what you want to do is you want to take some grease that's specially designed for brakes. It doesn't break down with high heat. And sometimes the brake pads will come with it. This is another type, like what you would see in the box, brake pads. And it's called Molly grease, and it's designed specifically for brakes. So what I do is I put a really thin layer, and I mean a real thin layer. I'm gonna wipe a lot of this off right now after I just put a few dabs on. And you put a thin layer in the channels to help everything slide back and forth and not stick. And but if you put too much of this on, it'll actually build up brake dust and actually cause it to stick. So you want to wipe off all the excess here. And then after that, on your new brake pads, now we want to prep our pads to go back into the calipers, or go back into the brackets. And what we do is we take a little bit of that grease also here at the shop, and this is what we like to do. And we like to put a little thin layer, just a thin layer on the back of them, and this helps reduce friction and squeaks and vibrations. And so we'll put this on here. Some manufacturers use shims and some do not. This particular car did not have shims on it, and it did not come with shims. If it does, I definitely like to use the shims. Some cars don't require them though. In this case, it doesn't. So I'll put a thin little layer of the grease on there, and after that, what I do is on the left and right they have the inner pad has this little squeal. It's called a squealer. So when it wears down to this little metal tab, it makes the brakes squeak, and then it tells the owners to bring the cars into the shop and get the brakes done. So they go in a certain way. So I like to do is I like to take. So I'm working on the driver side. So this is the inner pad, the driver side. So I know this is the one that's going to go. And then the outer pad is, they're both exactly the same. They don't have any specific way they go in. So what I'll do is I line them up with the inners, with the right sides, and I take it over here. Now that most of our prep work is done and our rotor is done being machined, go ahead and just put it on, and then I use a lug nut and just screw it on there, and it holds everything in place. After that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and rebolt our caliper up. But before bolt the caliper up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the bolts here that came out of them, and we're gonna put a little bit of this. It's called Permanex thread locker. Another brand is Loctite, and we're gonna put a little of this thread sealer on the bolts, and that helps reduce these bolts from backing back out. It's kind of like a little glue that you put on the threads, and it helps reduce the vibrations and help prevent them from loosening up and coming back up. So go ahead and put a few little dabs on there. That's all you don't need a lot. On this particular one, they actually have a lock washer, but a lot of manufacturers do not use lock washers. And so now that you got that on there, now you can go ahead and bolt that back up and tighten it up. Now that you got the bracket back on, you can go ahead and put your pads in. So make sure you got the one with the squealer goes on the inside, and then put your outer pad on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pin here and I'm going to pull it off. And it comes out completely like that. And I'm going to check it, make sure it's. I'm going to put a little fresh grease on it, and I'll use the same grease that I used for the back of the pads and the slides. So I'll put a little bit of that on the pin here, and also I'll put a fresh little bit on the pin here on the caliper. Then I'll put it back in after I'm done lubing it up, and it just presses on. So now that the pins are lubed up, all the pads are back on, we're going to take the caliper, and you're going to make sure that the brake line is not twisted. Very important that it's not twisted up. And then we're going to put it back in the boot here like this, pull it towards you, and then rotate it down until it goes on, and then you'll probably have to take the pin here in the back and push it in, and then now it'll seat the caliper all the way. Now you can take the caliper for one caliper bolt, the 14mm, put that on and tighten it up. So that pretty much completes the assembly part of the brake job. Now what you're going to do is repeat the same thing on the opposite side, and then after you're done with that, you're going to pump your brake pedal several times until all the fluid pushes back into the calipers, and you should be fine right there. And then you should put your wheels back on, torque your wheels down, and go for a test drive. But if your pedal for some reason is soft and spongy and you can't get a firm pedal, then somehow in the process of this you got air in the system, and you'll need to bleed the brakes. And I always recommend when bleeding brakes, just do all four wheels, and you would start at the right rear, then you go to the left rear, right front, left front. So after you're done with that, you're pretty much done with the brake job on a 2005 Subaru Outback. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive, and as always, it's my pleasure sharing my experience with you guys. I'd like to recommend you subscribe for valuable videos like this, and I'd like to thank you again for watching.